it made me really appreciate the architecture of the universe, how it's set up in a very interesting way where if you really try, in certain ways, if you really try, it backfires. And if you give up, in some ways, if you give up, then you actually get exactly where you're going. And it's and like you said, it's that acceptance of what is. I think that, like, if I could just go back and tell my 20-year-old self something, it would be, look, you're anxious right now. It's okay.
Right.
It's okay.
Yes.
Stop fighting it. And in fact, if you can even embrace it and turn yourself into that direction a little, even better. But if you
Right.
can't go too far, just be okay with it.
Right.
And
Right.
I
Right.
think that would have worked for me.
Welcome to Letting Go and the Greatest Secret, where we explore the end of your suffering and the beginning of lasting happiness. I'm Hale Dwoskin, and today I'll be joined by Chris Niebauer. Chris Niebauer earned his PhD in cognitive neuropsychology at the University of Toledo, specializing in the difference between the left and right side of the human brain. He is the author of No Self, No Problem: How Neuropsychology is Catching Up to Buddhism, and a professor at Slippery Rock University in Pennsylvania, where he teaches courses on consciousness, mindfulness, left and right brain differences, and artificial intelligence. So, before we get into your book and everything like that, can you share a little bit of the story about how you got to be interested in this whole topic and whatever direct experience you've had of what a lot of people call non-duality?
For me, it all started with a really severe neurosis. I think so many of these stories, when I meet new people who are either in non-duality or they're in to some kind of form of spirituality, it's kind of remarkable how many stories start off with suffering.
Yes.
And then it was very intense for me. Every waking moment was just dreadful anxiety, fear of death, continuous. It was so bad, it was virtually impossible to even have a conversation with someone. And I so remember the one moment where it got so, like, the suffering got so intense. I sort of gave up on it. I said, "Do your worst. I've just had enough of you."
Right.
And then all of a sudden, once I totally surrendered to the suffering, it just went away. And I
Right.
remember just being so, like, shocked by it.
Right.
This wonderful feeling of levity and just everything felt light and like, it was, I just couldn't believe it was that easy. I thought, why was I struggling? Why was I clinging to it? Why was I fighting it so much? All I had to do was give up. And then once I gave up and totally surrendered to it, it just passed. And it always stayed with me. And and so that was one of the reasons I got into well, to go back a little bit, I don't think it was a coincidence that in the middle of all my suffering, I got very heavy into Eastern philosophy. Alan Watts was my main inspiration,
Uh-huh.
and so, yeah, I think I had done the work. It wasn't maybe just a total coincidence. I had done the work and read and studied, and but that moment of surrender isn't an intellectual thing. And so, even though I had done the prep for it, however it came about, it wasn't just an intellectual choice, like you just check a box or something and says, "Yeah, I'll surrender today." It was really connected with a much bigger process that went beyond what I conceived of myself at the time. And so it radically changed how I defined who I was. It radically changed what I thought about consciousness, what I thought about the nature of the universe. And it just got me in touch with something far more vast, far more mystical than simply who I was defining myself as up to those 20 years.
Yes. Yes. So you were pretty young when this happened.
It was my early 20s,
Mhm.
And I would probably say my 20s were a pretty bad neurotic mess. And then towards the end is when the clarity started hitting, and I started
Right.
realizing that it was so clear to me that my anxiety was me not wanting to be anxious.
Right.
And
No, that's a really important point. Something that most people miss, that the not wanting to experience what you're experiencing is really on some level, the only problem with experiencing.
it is. So that's such an important message because, particularly for people who are just starting off in spirituality, because when they get into it, like for me, when I started spirituality, I was looking for some trick. I was looking for some way out.
Yes, yes.
And there is a way out, but it's a little bit different than the way I had conceptualized it. I thought it would be some kind of, if I just meditated long enough, and I used to time myself to see how long, if I just meditate long enough, it's got to happen.
Right, 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 right. Yes,
And
yeah. Well, so
and
many
this,
people go, sorry, go ahead,
oh
finish your
no,
thought.
I was just going to say this doesn't work like that. And
No, no. Yeah, so many people think it's about quantity, or even more than that, they think that they need to change themselves in order for them to be, or for what is to be as it already is. That's not a change. It's already here. It's already that. And
yeah.
it's even more than here and now. It's just what is.
And
Do you?
then that continuous fighting what is, and that actually is the problem. And that's why we try to intellectualize what acceptance is, and it's not an intellectual thing. I say this all the time, that so many of us were stuck in a thinking problem, and then we get into it even worse because we think we can think our way out of a thinking problem with more thinking.
Right. Hey, this isn't working. I think I'll do it harder and more.
And that was me, and of course I was an academic. I was in grad school.
Yes,
I
yes.
was I was studying psychology and neuroscience, and it just all was like, if I just figure out the brain, I'll have it all figured out.
Yes, yes. Well, again,
And
but
it,
what you experience is not at all unusual. Each person, a parent person's story is obviously different, but there's threads, and one of the threads is thinking that I don't know enough. I need to get the right knowledge. If I get the right knowledge, then everything will be okay. And it never seems to be enough. Or I just need to fix or change or control what is, and then everything will be okay. It doesn't work that way, does it?
and it made me really appreciate the architecture of the universe, how it's set up in a very interesting way, where if you really try, in certain ways, if you really try, it backfires. And if you give up, in some ways, if you give up, then you actually get exactly where you're going. And it's and like you said, it's that acceptance of what is. I think that, like, if I could just go back and tell my 20-year-old self something, it would be, look, you're anxious right now. It's okay.
Right.
It's okay.
Yes.
Stop fighting it. And in fact, if you can even embrace it and turn yourself into that direction a little, even better. But if you
Right.
can't go too far, just be okay with it.
Right.
And
Right.
I
Right.
think that would have worked for me.
Yes. Yes. No, it's such an important step. And I've met people who've been on the path for 50, 60, 70 years, and they're still struggling because that basic of what is, period, or whatever's appearing is what's appearing, the fight, including the fighting, by the way. So that's part of what is. Uh, when most people haven't seen that. They're thinking it will be okay when, and the when is ever changing.
It just keeps getting extended, and then you keep changing the whole book, and it's
Yeah.
it's remarkable what we'll go through to continue suffering.
Yes. It's almost as though that was our goal all along.
Talking about that mysterious architecture of the universe, it makes you feel like that might be part of it because suffering does wake you up.
Uh-huh.
And it's when I think back, like I wouldn't change anything because I wouldn't be where I'm at right now if I hadn't gone through that suffering. If I
Yes.
hadn't gone through that, I don't know what I would have ended up doing in life. It would have been fine. But it- what I'm doing right now, even talking to you, all this came about because of intense suffering that I thought was some kind of punishment from some evil force.
Right, right,
It
right.
wasn't at all.
Right, right.
It's a much more benevolent kind of purposeful, it's kind of in the design. Not to say that, we're here to suffer, but the suffering has a purpose to it and it goes to a higher place in the end.
Yes. But even if it doesn't have a purpose, it is part of what is. To fight it is, well, to quote the Star Trek, resistance is futile.
I was the only one to quote Star Trek. Thanks. But
So, and how does this translate? Do you into your life now? How do you work with? Do you work with people? I assume you do.
mostly students, it sort of transformed. I was pretty much a basic psychology professor for a long time.
Yes.
And this kind of resulted in a massive reorganization of what I did as a professor. I ended up I got rid of all my old classes. I started a new department where I have classes on mindfulness, consciousness, how the left and right sides of the brain work, artificial intelligence. And the reason, and that may sound a little strange to do artificial intelligence, but the reason I'm so fascinated with that is because as we build intelligent machines that are really close to humans, it forces us to go deeper into what the human trip is about.
Yes. Yes.
So I did all these new classes, and I really changed what I was doing with the students. And so my most popular class was probably the mindfulness class because we would do simple things like mindful eating class, and the students were shocked that it was almost as if they had never been mindful during eating their entire life.
Right.
And it was the first time they'd actually been where they're at and did what they were doing.
Right.
And usually people are on social media now while they eat and never even conscious. And they couldn't believe how the food tasted.
Right. Right.
The food was just, they're like, how could this, how was I missing all of this?
Yes. Yes.
Um, some of the students, they get into, again, intellectual pursuits and all that's fine, but they were missing out on some of these self-growth things. Like we would even take some yoga mats and just go out into the quad and do yoga. And I would show them simple yoga moves. And it became one of these classes where people would just show up, even though they're like, well, I'm not in this class, but I just want to hang out for the day.
Right.
Sure, that's fine. And so it really it changed what I was doing professionally. So it really kind of wove its way into everything I was doing.
That's beautiful. Yeah, it's nice to give, especially students who are going to be influencing all these people who are going to have people come to them for support to help open their mind and depathologize psychology. Would you agree with that? It's kind of a depathologizing is what you're doing?
You mean kind of like destigmatizing it?
Yes.
That's it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I think we spend particularly with social media now, we spend so much time putting on this persona, and that in fact, it's funny. I had a story where my students would always tell me, "Have a good day," "Have a good day, Dr. Niebauer," or something like that. And I said, so let's just stop that. Like, let's just have the day we're going to have. And every day doesn't have to be good.
Right.
And I was trying to help them realize that you don't have to be happy. This expectation we have where you always have to be happy, and that gets so exaggerated on social media where like everyone has to be happy, and you can't have a down day.
Mm-hmm.
But part of the human existence is to sometimes you're going to have some sadness. Sometimes you're going to, emotions, they fluctuate.
Yes.
And again, like we were saying, if you fight it, that makes it much worse. So if you just have, and that's why we ended up with the expression, just have the day you're going to have.
Yes.
And so students kind of picked up on that. And so it's really, they're funny. They'll still say sometimes out of habit, they'll say, have a night, and then they catch themselves and they say, oh, just have the day you're going to have. And I'm like, yeah, you too.
Well, that sounds like fun. It really does. So what's in your book, No Self, No Problem? What's that about?
So I used my training as a neuropsychologist is about the left and right sides of the brain.
Yes.
So I use that as kind of a foundation to explore who we are and the idea of the self and how the left brain creates a story that's not accurate at all
Right.
because it's just so good at making up stories. And it usually does it with that voice in the head because the left brain controls language. And some of the students, again, were really surprised that we all talk to ourselves so much. And I would do a simple exercise in class where I would say, okay, for the next 10 seconds, just don't talk to yourself. Just silence the inner voice. And after 3 or 4 seconds, none of them could do it. And they were very surprised that they had been talking to themselves so habitually that it just seemed so normal that
Yes.
none of them realized how really strange it is that we're continuously talking to ourselves. And so in the first part of the book, I talk a lot about the left brain, how it constructs stories. And of course, the biggest story it constructs is who we think we are, that ego, that sense of self, and have the insight that it's just a story like any other. And and who you are is far greater than just the story the left brain is telling.
Mhm.
And so we shift over from the left brain and its storytelling and its confabulations and its beliefs and particularly the left brain does so much work on seeing the world categorically in black and white and simplistic caricature terms that are just
Yes, yes, yes.
and that makes our life kind of easy in some ways. And I explain that this is an old program. If you think about evolution and the stuff we had to deal with like 40,000, 100,000 years ago, it sort of made sense that we'd have this device that would make the world very simplistic. And it might be paranoid and biased towards the negative because that helps survival. But we don't live in that world anymore. And it's much better to see it as just a tool. And, I always say, are you using the tool or is the tool using you?
Right, right.
Start to learn to shift from that left brain, ego-centered, me-based consciousness to the right brain. And then in the second half of the class, we talk about, or in the second half of the book too, we talk about right brain consciousness, which the right brain, instead of making categorical divisions, the right brain sees all the connections. It sees the context. And it doesn't see me as separate from the environment, but it sees me as a participant and sort of the yang to the yin and interconnected with everything. And when you do that, it really shifts your emotional experience of what it means to be human,
Mhm.
because you don't feel disconnected. It's not always about you. And so the title "No Self, No Problem" came about just because I asked the students, I'll say, start to consider the problems going on right now and make the connection that every problem is your problem. Like all the things you've got going on that are problems, they're always about you. And it's your rent, or it's your tuition, or it's your job career. And then I say, well, what if the you is just an idea? What if you doesn't even exist? What happens to all those problems? And then that hits, and then I realize like so much of the problems. And again, I'm not talking about someone with a serious physical problem. I'm talking about those self-made problems that we come up with, and they're all centered around the idea of the self. So when you see through the self illusion, those problems just disappear
Yes, yes.
for the students. And then we get into the right brain, and that's when we get into music and we get into play. And one of the ways I characterize the differences between the left and right sides of the brain is that the left brain is terribly serious. It is very goal oriented. Its main intent is to keep this body alive, the physical body, and that's what the left brain is all about. So it has to be very serious. But the right brain is all about play. It's about humor. It's about having fun. And when you shift over, that's why when you start having music, like you play music, but you have to go to work. And so when you start having that sense of play, I see a huge shift in the students because the students they're so serious today. It's like it's some kind of cultural thing where maybe we are left-brained, and they're very focused on success. And I have to have I ask them all, like, what do you think your first year's salary will be? And they're like, I want $100,000 a year. And so it's all based on
Right.
and I'm like, well, don't you want to have some fun? Don't you want to? Don't you want to? Who wants to go to work? I want to go to play.
Right. Right.
And it gives them something to consider. And I think with a lot of them, they reconsider some of the stuff that they're doing because they realize that a successful life is one where it always feels like you're playing. And it always feels like, and nothing is really too serious. And, you have moments of serious. You visit seriousness, like maybe an hour a day, but the rest of the time is
Yes.
play, fun. And I think that has a remarkable, reality reacts to that. When you're
Yes.
very serious, the reality around you gets very serious. When you start having a playful attitude with reality, it's amazing to me on a personal level. It's amazing to me how the universe plays back with you.
Yes.
And everything becomes you see this game and you start seeing the human trip as this grand game of play. And I think it was Alan Watts said that the reason humans suffer is because we take seriously what God meant as humor.
Yes.
Thumbs up the left and right sides of the brain. The left brain is serious. That's why we suffer. The moment we start listening to music and getting into spontaneous laughter and just not taking the whole thing very seriously, the suffering it doesn't become the enemy anymore.
Right.
When you see it as a game, it's just part of the game. It's not. I had a funny experience the other day.
Yes.
Where I was, I don't know, maybe I'm like 55, maybe I'm just getting a little old, but I was looking everywhere for my cell phone. And I was looking everywhere and I started getting that kind of like, okay, am I going to have to buy a new cell? And then I looked and it was in my hand the whole time. And I couldn't help but just laugh. I thought it was so funny.
Right.
Then it hit me, that's almost a metaphor what this whole trip is about. I mean, we're always looking for something. We're looking for the meaning. We're looking for like, why am I here? All the big questions. And I really think at some point, it just kind of hits you. The whole picture hits you. Like it's been here all the time. You've
Yes.
always had the answers. You always, you've just played this game of pretending that you've forgotten it for a while.
Right.
And I think at some point, maybe it'll be, at the moment when we pass but it's going to be, since you brought up Star Trek, I'll bring up another one for you.
Sure.
Remember when Captain Kirk died? I thought that that was really interesting. If you remember, his last words were, "That was fun."
Right.
And I think that we'll all have that experience. We'll recognize how playful the universe is and how it was all fun, even if we didn't recognize it at the time.
Yes. Well, yeah. Again, we definitely take who we are, if we can actually find that one, and the circumstances of our story very, very seriously. And in doing so, we miss not just the fun, but that's just the exquisite beauty that is life. And beauty, of course, is fun too.
It is. It's like art. Another one of my favorite quotes from Bob Ross was, there are no mistakes, they're just happy accidents. It's like, that's a very playful way to get through life. Real,
Yes,
and because some people are so hard on themselves, and that comes with that serious idea of the self. And if they make a mistake, they just can't let it go.
yes,
But
yes,
when you see it all as part of a very interesting game, a very, you know, uh, mysterious kind of game where the accidents are just part of the fun,
yes,
and mistakes that
yes, yes,
they all got us to where we're at right now. And so, you know, when you see that, I spend virtually no time in rumination. Rumination doesn't make any sense. It doesn't work for me because it was all here it was all part of the game. And
yes,
so I tell students who can, sometimes they'll do something, then they just have such a hard time letting go with it. You
yes,
know,
yes,
and that's a tough thing for people. And I remember it, what it's like.
yes,
But it's because you're in that mode, that serious mode, and um, every play you make in that serious, it's all uh, something that's filled with regrets if you make a mistake.
right,
But
right,
if,
right.
if you realize that it's all behind the curtain, it's not serious. It's like any game. In the surface level, you have to have it's not going to work unless you follow some rules and take it a little seriously. But behind the scenes, it's all for
Right.
fun.
Yes. Yeah, that's a very freeing perspective. By the way, are you familiar with the work that I do, the Sedona method?
Not explicitly. I've seen it. I actually may have actually came across it quite a while ago.
Yeah, well, it's been around a long time. Yeah, the only reason I brought it up is because the one of the things that happens as people do our work is we help people get in touch with their natural ability to just simply let go of whatever they appear to be holding on to, including the sense of being that separate individual. And it helps them discover what's actually right here, right now, beyond the person. That's why I was attracted to the title of your book, no self, no problem. That's what people discover as they do this work, is that the less there's this appearance of a self, the less there's an appearance of a problem, and you're not your story. Never have been.
Yeah, and that's letting go as much as I can, because that's the ego, and that's the part that clings. That's the
Yes,
part that wants it has a story, and it expects the universe to live up to that story, and it's
yes,
deeply disappointed when the universe doesn't just follow orders.
right. Yeah,
and and so yeah, you see it as a story, and just everything else it just kind of falls into place. It's weird, isn't it? It's just
yeah, yeah. It's really fun to watch. The other thing I noticed when I first learned it, I the this material was originally inspired by my mentor Lester Levinson, and when I first learned it in 1976, I from the very beginning there was so much laughter where there wasn't before, and now laughter is just part of life. Uh, I go to funny movies and well, I laugh all the time, but when I'm in a funny movie, I'm usually the one who starts to laugh first and stops the last.
it's one of the things I tell my students, because of social media, they get pulled into drama and they get pulled into politics, and I say, just every so often take a break and just put a little bit of old school comedy on. So for me, that's like 70s and 80s, and really whatever works for them. But and just watch them like live comedy or something, or stand up for a little
Right.
bit, and just it could, because I think laughter is one of those things. If you in psychology, I don't know how much if you ever looked into the psychology of humor, but there's almost nothing there,
Right.
because it's one of these grand mysteries. It's like consciousness. I mean, how much have we done? How much work have brilliant minds done on consciousness, and they've gotten absolutely nowhere.
Exactly.
To us. Humor, consciousness is probably one of the biggest ones, and it makes it exciting to me. That like right now when we're talking, we really don't know what's going to happen in the next few seconds, and
Right.
that's like a really exciting way to live. At the end of the book, I actually talk about non-duality a little bit, and one of the things that when I had some experiences that fit very much with non-duality, then I would get back into the intellectual mode, and I would think, well, this is interesting that there's a certain non-duality to the universe, but then it plays like it's dualistic, and I wonder why it would play to be dualistic. Why is it playing that game of why did it convince me, that I'm a me and I'm different and separate, and then have the realization that that's all just a story. And
Right.
the best metaphor I could come up with is this idea of going to a casino. So imagine if you owned a casino. It would be terribly boring to go gamble at your own casino, because if you won, you'd be losing, and if you lost, then you'd really be winning. It just wouldn't be any fun, because no matter what happens, you would never win or lose.
Right.
So the whole game wouldn't work if you gambled in the casino in which you owned. But I thought, well, wouldn't it be fun if you could, like, yeah, maybe you do own a casino. So, you're it. This is
Right.
it. It's the whole non-duality. But then we forget the whole thing. We forget that we own the casino. You forget. And then you go in, and now it all becomes that serious. Like now it's
Yes,
like,
yes,
oh,
yes.
man, I get very excited. If I lose, it's tragedy. But that's just on the surface. Behind the scenes, no, there's no winner or loser. We're just
Right.
having this kind of weird game we're playing. And to me, that was the way I was able to understand, and at least the intellectual part of my needs were fulfilled with that, to understand why a non-dual universe would play a dualistic one,
Right.
and
Right.
sort of
Yeah.
fits.
Yeah. No, it's a fun analogy. It's a fun analogy. When we are lost in the story or in a particular part of the game, anything that can jar us loose from that lost apparent lostness, because we're never really lost. I mean, because when someone's playing a video game, I used that analogy, I believe, earlier, but when someone's playing a video game, if their character dies, they don't.
Yeah.
It's just the avatar. And so as you see that this world and everything in it and the character you're playing are all part of the same one appearance, that all is, or at least apparently, and that all your belief in being separate from this and manipulating it, controlling it, having an effect on it, is just a story or an illusion. As that's seen, the whole experience of life changes quantitatively.
And for me, the shift was not a complete to the positive all the time. But I think the radical shift for me is that I didn't see the negative as negative anymore.
Yes.
It's like, so it's, again, it didn't totally alleviate suffering. It wasn't like every day was blissful, although I felt that the nature of the universe has a certain bliss to it underneath all the drama. But I'd still would have days that I considered not so good, but they had a completely different approach to it. It was kind of, it was like, okay, it's okay, and boy, I tell you, when you have that approach, it's strange how quickly the clouds clear when you're not forcing them to clear.
Right.
And that's that kind of interesting relationship with the universe. I think Einstein, he said, he asked if the universe was a friendly universe. And to me, I always think, is the universe playful? And it just seems to have that, there's there's some strange rules to it that if you insist and demand on something, it just seems like it just never happens. It never manifests. It never appears. But when you have this playful, like, it really doesn't matter so much, but it might be kind of fun. Then all of a sudden, it seems like it's this abundant, this everything that you can do with that approach seems to manifest itself.
Yes.
And it was actually when I was gambling with some people, and what I had noticed is that people who were actually pretty well to do financially, and they were just having fun, they just won so much money.
Right.
Just like money just came their way.
Right.
And it was the person who was very serious, and they're like they were expecting to make money, and then it just seemed like they went broke.
Right.
And
Right.
I'm sure psychology has an explanation.
Right.
For me, it just left this kind of impression on the nature. It left an impression on me on the nature of the universe and how it responds to our attitudes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Wonderful. So, is there anything else that you'd like to share with our audience? Maybe some, you've already mentioned from the very beginning about if you just basically allow life to unfold and stop fighting it, that's often just that in and of itself is often enough. Is there anything else like that you'd like to share with people?
So we did the no self, no problem, and one of the consistent feedbacks I got, because we would throw in exercises, and I got so much feedback from people who had read the book, and they're like, the intellectual philosophy, that stuff's okay, but what I really liked was the exercises. And so we are coming out with a kind of a companion workbook, hopefully this year. How these things are, it just depends on how things go. But it's actually pretty close to being finished. Of course, how many times I've said that, but it's all exercises. So we really decided to okay, we're not going to give you a whole bunch of philosophy. We're going to go in and we're just going to do exercise after exercise to deconstruct the self illusion and help you experience all these other forms of consciousness that probably in your life before, but they were just you just were so focused on thinking, and you were so focused on the intellect. They were kind of like just background noise.
Right.
And the wonderful states of consciousness. Like I always tell people, you probably drove to work and you probably had some music on, and you probably, it was almost a mystical experience, but when we get to work, the left brain just starts to take everything serious again, and you just you forget about it all.
Right.
You forget that on your way to work, you had a mystical experience. And so what we did is we come up with a bunch of exercises to help make all those mystical, blissful, peaceful experiences home, and then just make this kind of serious work thing, because you have to pay bills and all that, supposedly, I guess. And so you could just do all that, but it's more maybe an hour a day. But you can't do it through philosophy. I'm a huge fan of philosophy. I'm not criticizing it, but to really have the change, it has to come through you. You have to do the work. And all the book does, it just gives you exercises so you can see for yourself that the story is just another form of it's just another it's like all the stories, it's like taking a TV show too seriously. It's like, well, it's just a script. And it's just embedded in the culture, and all this stuff is because of you're just at a particular time and place and culture. And when you see beyond that, then it's no absolute guarantee that you won't have bad days. That's not the point of it at all. It's an adjustment where the bad days aren't really as bad as you thought they were. In fact, if I was going to sum up the whole book and all the exercises, I would say reality, the universe, it's not what you think it is. The thought is just a almost like cartoon-like idea of what reality is all really about.
Yes, and it's all after the fact.
Yeah. Yeah,
All the thinking can't keep up with what is. It's always about what was
yeah, it's a
or
great
what
point.
might be.
And the thinking is always like something happens, then you think about it,
Exactly.
and it's just not being in the moment.
Right.
So to, it's almost like when we talked about like in mindfulness, of course that's what mindfulness is you stop thinking about peeling potatoes and then you're just peeling the potatoes,
Right.
you know. And so
Right.
um and that seems to be enough to create a shift in people where, you know, they get in touch with, I love that saying by Nietzsche that, if you have a why, you can deal with any how, which just, if you have that kind of underlying meaning in your life, you can deal with any kind of suffering.
Mhm.
And I think that shift, just to spend a little time in actual reality. And reality, here in the West, sometimes we get criticized for being materialist, but I think the material world, like this material, like it's a fascinating place.
Yes.
It's an amazing place. And in this, and you can get so drawn into a flower or a lake or just a smell. And it's that alone, like the sensations you get of reality can be so overwhelming that for it just gets you out of the thinking mind for a little bit.
Yes.
And on
Yes.
your life, you've got that underlying foundation of meaning in life. And you get
Yes.
the meaning not by philosophizing. You get the meaning by smelling coffee or, just by being here. And, who knows? Maybe this is all simulation. Who knows?
Right.
But there is something really marvelous about the material world. And
Yes.
so I find ourselves, it's the thinking mind that gets us into trouble. And so hopefully the exercises, it'll help people just spend a little time out of thinking and kind of waking up
Sure.
into reality. And reality's it's amazing how we're not continuously blown away by the nature of our existence.
Yes.
Wake
Yes.
up in the morning and be like, I'm conscious in this world, and it's a mystery. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but I mean, just that it's a mystery is enough to make my day today.
Right. Yeah, it's a big wow.
Huge one.
Is there, do you have a favorite exercise or an exercise that you can share quickly with us that people could take away and experiment with? A
One of my
little
favorites.
taste?
Yeah, one of my favorites. I put it at the end of the book, and I'd like to it's a really quick kind of thing, and you can do it anywhere. Although, just to go back, because the students gave me so much feedback on a body scan,
Uh-huh.
and it's a real simple meditation where you
Yes.
just maybe first focus on your feet, and then you consciously let your sensations reside in your feet, and then maybe your legs, and you move around the body. And that was wonderful for them because it got them out of the thinking mind,
Right, right,
and
right.
you were consciously here in the world rather than thinking. And I love that exercise. But I mentioned it because so many students came out to me and they were like, that was wonderful. Like it just gave them, they're like, anytime they feel a little anxious, that's what they do. And that's actually not that different than the technique of grounding.
Yes.
And, where if you're having a serious panic attack, you just, name 5 things you can see, it brings
Right.
you out of the mind into reality, or at least to the material world. But I think my exercise I really like is at the end of the book where you really get into some Eastern philosophy and the notion of I am. And you go through a list of kind of deconstructing what you're really not. And you do it hypothetically. So you start back and you go, like John Lennon's song, like Imagine, if you just, we're really good with imagination. So we can imagine, what if I'm not my gender? What if I'm not my age? What if I'm not this character called Chris? What if I'm not my job? What if I'm not how much money I make? What if I'm not the car that I drive? What if I'm not how smart I am? And you just go through this list and you end it with just like, what if I'm not who I think I am? And kind of just leave it with that, like what
Yes.
if all because we have thoughts and thoughts create the boundaries of the self. And they're really boundaries in the sense that they're limitations. So you just all these cultural constructs of your job, your gender, your race, your sexual identity. All of these things, are they just imagine, what if they're not who you really are? Could you maybe you'll put them all back on and go to work, or you'll because we do put these things on, and our social roles are things that we do. But what if you just get to the self beyond all of the images of who you think you are, and just leave it at the end, just like I am, and then just don't finish it. I am, and then kind of just have some fun with that thoughtless sensation, that thoughtless feeling. I am, you know.
Right. Well, that sounds like a fun exercise. Great. So, anything else that you want to share before we wrap it up?
No, it's a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. Thanks. I appreciate the time. It was
Yeah, likewise. It was really a lot of fun. Your exuberance is contagious. And
yeah, it's that excite. Like, I think when you get into that time, like, to me, the central mystery of the human experience is just consciousness.
yes.
Just we're here and we're awake.
Yes.
And when you start tapping into that, it has so much energy to it.
Yes.
It has so much fascination, and sometimes I'm amazed that we don't just run down the street like, I'm a conscious being.
Right.
Because it's gotten kind of ordinary to us, because I think we've clouded it with so much thought that we forget how mysterious consciousness is and how we're mysterious beings.
Yes.
So yeah.
Great. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Chris Niebauer. You can learn more about Chris at chrisniebauerphd.com. That's ChrisNiebauerphd.com. If you've enjoyed these podcasts, please subscribe so you have immediate access to future episodes. Please give us a 5-star rating and share it with the people you care about. If you'd like to learn more about my work, my mentor Lester Levenson's work, and the Sedona Method, please visit www.sedona.com. As you explore our site, you'll learn the key to lasting happiness, success, peace, and emotional well-being. We have books, courses, events, and plenty of free material to explore. Again, go to sedona.com. That's sedona.com. Thank you for being here, and we'll catch you on the next episode of Letting Go and the Greatest Secret.